The jungle of Gliese 119C didn't whisper. It watched. Every branch, vine, and canopy above Sergeant Raina Harrow crackled with tension, not from wind or wildlife, but from the electromagnetic hum of cloaked drones scouring for her heat signature. They wouldn't find it. She hadn't given them one. Flat on her belly, half submerged in a muddy ridge overgrown with alien moss, Raina adjusted the rifle's bipod. Her camouflage suit, patched with local flora, had been soaked for days, her scent masked with crushed leaves and battlefield ash. Patience wasn't a strategy. It was a lifestyle. A shimmer on her scope flickered, movement, just beyond the downed Confederacy skimmer. She exhaled slowly, lining the reticle on the blue-skinned patrol leader's throat. "One more step," she murmured. The soldier's step. Crack. His body crumpled before the others even flinched. Scrambling for cover, the alien squad burst into panicked calls, gesturing wildly toward the treeline. Another broke for the ridge, too fast, too loud. Crack. Down. The rest dove behind a cratered boulder, blindly spraying plasma bursts toward empty jungle. Raina didn't flinch. She didn't need to move. This was her nest. Layered again, mapped out in her mind like the floor plan of an old childhood home. She had 5 fallback points, each set with noise traps and emergency escape tunnels. They had confusion, fear, and heat signatures. She watched the survivors fumble with a drone beacon. One of them activated it, and the whirring disk zipped upward through the canopy. She let it go. Her job wasn't to be invisible. It was to make sure they knew she was there, and that they feared every moment they had left. 2 down, she whispered into her comm, 3 remaining. Recon drone launched. They'll call in heavy. No response. Static. She tapped the earpiece again. Echo 2, confirm. You reading this? Silence. She frowned and sat up slightly, ducking under her camo netting. Her spotter, Cole, had been silent for an hour. That wasn't like him. She scanned the backup feed from the remote perch they'd set up northeast. The lens was cracked. Blood on the edge. Her gut dropped. She tapped her helmet mic, switching to emergency line. This is Harrow. Sniper nest compromised. Spotter possibly down. Requesting evac route validation and new sat feed. Enemy counter-sniper active. Far above, buried in thick interference clouds, satellites weren't responding either. Which meant one thing. They'd dropped him. Zernvrax. The Confederacy's ghost. Sharpshooter supreme. One-shot kills from impossible ranges, a war record as clean as his thermal trail. If Cole was dead, it wasn't luck. It was precision. They sent a marksman to kill a ghost. Raina's fingers clenched. She packed up quickly, rolling back her camo net and snapping the rifle into its sling. No time to linger. No time to grieve. She moved silently, sliding through vegetation like a shadow, angling west toward fallback point Charlie 3, an abandoned outpost built into the roots of a massive alien tree. The kind of place only a local would remember. She reached it in 20 minutes, belly crawling the final stretch as beams of moonlight pierced the treetop haze. Once inside, she checked the hidden monitor. Static filled the feed, except for one channel. An image. Fuzzy at first, then clearer. Her sniper perch. A body in the dirt beside it. Face down. One shot to the spine. Cole. Her breath caught. Then the camera zoomed in. She blinked. That wasn't automated. That was someone controlling it, watching her. Cute toy, a voice said. It echoed through her helmet's receiver. Not from the comms. From the nest's own microphone feed. Raina froze. Your spotter was skilled, the voice said again. Calm. Measured. Not good enough. Neither will you be. She reached for the feed cutoff. Do not run, human. I want you to see me when you die. She shut the system off. Heart steady, hands smooth, she leaned against the steel plating and let the rage settle into her bones. Not panic. Not fear. Focus. So, the legend had come to play. She slid a new magazine into her rifle, checked the wind direction through a pinched vent slit, and laid out a trio of secondary optic. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was war in its purest, oldest form, the hunter and the hunted. And this time she was both. Her finger hovered over the trigger of a remote mine she'd buried an hour ago near the ridge, one the surviving alien soldiers now scrambled over as their superiors barked orders from above. Beat. Boom. The jungle lit up in orange flame, branches splintering, alien screams cutting through the night. From the fire's edge, something shifted. She turned sharply, scope raised there. A silhouette. Upright. Calm. 4 eyes. Vrax. For the first time in years, Reyna felt her pulse spike. She didn't shoot. He didn't flinch. He simply raised one hand in mock salute, then vanished into the smoke. She lowered the rifle. That wasn't an opportunity. It was a message. He was coming. She whispered into the mic again, more to herself than anyone now. Welcome to Earth's jungle, Vrax. I've been waiting. Reyna moved like shadow beneath stone. Every step was calculated, every pause deliberate. In the jungle, sound killed. Hesitation too. She'd learned that the hard way on Europa during the siege of Cradle One. And Vrax? He didn't give second chances. She weaved through the undergrowth, keeping her back to a wide tree trunk the color of oxidized copper. Each pulse from her motion sensor wristband echoed like a slow heartbeat, no movement within 50 meters. That didn't comfort her. Vrax didn't trigger motion sensors. She reached a narrow ravine choked with gnarled roots and dropped down into the trench. Mud soaked through her boot. Her path would curve west, across a shallow stream, then snake up to a hidden overlook. A fallback nest. Old, forgotten, never used until now. Something cracked behind her. Not a branch. Not a creature. A warning. She hit the ground instinctively, rolled behind a jutting rock shelf. A plasma bolt hissed overhead, slicing into the ravine wall and detonating bark and stone. He's zeroing, she muttered. She crawled, not back, but toward the source. Most snipers ran from the shot. The best? They ran toward the barrel. Her HUD blinked. Thermal overlay activated. No body heat, but a distortion shimmered faintly near the upper ridgeline. She paused. Vrax was cloaked. No doubt. She lifted a mirror shard on a collapsible stick, angling it toward the distortion. Another hiss of energy. The mirror shattered. Too close. Ballsy, she whispered. She deployed a flare canister, lobbed it sideways through the root. The jungle lit up in strobing red pulses. Shadows writhed. Leaves ignited. Vrax moved, barely visible, slipping through the false sunburst. Reyna fired. Crack. Missed. He ducked left, rolled under a fallen log. She sprinted for a better angle, bounding up the ravine wall, fingers digging into bark, knees scraping moss-covered rock. She reached the top and... nothing. Just branches swaying, smoke curling, and the faint burn of ozone. He was gone. Again. She didn't curse. Didn't panic. She exhaled and turned her back to the trees, watching everything without focusing on anything. Eyes too sharp were easier to blind. Then she heard it. Breathing. Not hers. Slow. Steady. Controlled. Closed. She dropped, rolled, knife in hand, but struck air. He was behind her. She spun. Steel clashed with alloy. Vrax's blade met hers. A long, slender thong of black metal, hissing with energy. His faceplate reflected her, cold, calm, unreadable. "You're not bad," he said. She gritted her teeth, shoved him back with a boot to the chest. "You're not either." He slid on the moss but didn't fall. His posture was fluid, like a serpent standing on 2 legs. He didn't speak again. Instead, he lunged, blade slashing sideways. Reyna ducked, countered, caught his arm, twisted, elbowed his side. He grunted, broke free. She rolled backward, kicked off a tree, and landed in a low crouch, rifle already back in hand. But he was gone. A shimmer to her left. She didn't aim. She fired through the shimmer. Crack. A metallic clang. A growl. Then footsteps, fast and light, vanishing into the foliage. She slumped against the tree, heart pounding. He bled. Not much. Not enough to slow him, but enough to track. She activated her drone, a tiny orb the size of a pebble, tossed it into the air. It zipped upward, scanning the path he'd taken. The overlay in her HUD shifted, highlighting faint traces, a blood droplet here, a bent leaf there. She followed. The trail led to an overhang, wide and rocky, overlooking the Confederacy's landing zone. She saw it clearly now, alien tents, modular towers, walkers pacing in guarded arcs. Below, the remaining troops formed perimeter patrols. Their general barked orders through a translator drone. But Reyna wasn't here for them. She spotted Vrax again, barely, perched on a tree limb just above the overlook, scanning the horizon. She didn't move, didn't breathe. A click echoed from her rifle's chamber. He turned his head, just a fraction. Too late. Crack. He dropped. But not far. He'd shifted at the last second, enough to turn a kill shot into a shoulder wound. He fell into the foliage, crashing through branches, vanishing into the underbrush. Reyna exhaled, pulled back, and ducked into the camo netting of the overlook. Now the rules had changed. Vrax had felt her trigger. He knew she was his equal now. And she'd wounded him. That wasn't just physical. It was personal. Her comms pinged. A new voice. Static, then. Echo 1, this is command. Emergency line re-established. What's your status? She blinked, surprised at the sound of another human voice. Alive. Engaged with Confederacy's elite sniper. Confirmed identity, Vrax. Spotter down. Mission integrity compromised but intact. Received. Exfil denied. Command priority changed. You are ordered to hold position. Vrax must not leave the jungle alive. Repeat. He must not leave. Reyna stared at the transmission for a long second. Then she smiled. Copy. He won't. She looked out at the jungle again. This wasn't a war zone anymore. It was a duel. And she was done running. Reyna didn't waste time. She was already packing up the remnants of her gear, secure in her nest atop the jagged cliffside. The rising sun caught the fog in the treetops, casting the jungle below in a dull haze. Silence lingered in the air like the calm before a storm, but Reyna's pulse was steady. She checked her rifle, her hands moving automatically. It was a trusted weapon, customized with an anti-material scope, a suppressor, and a modification kit that made it nearly silent in the air. But today, she wouldn't need silence. The jungle had a voice of its own, and she planned to let it roar. Her mind cycled through the last few hours. She'd wounded Vrax. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He wouldn't be moving as fluidly as before. She could already sense the shift in the atmosphere. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a game of survival, but more. This was war between two apex predators, and only one of them would walk out of here alive. Her comms crackled again, the voice of command returning. Echo 1, your orders remain unchanged. Vrax is a priority target. We're rerouting reinforcements to your position, but you're still the best shot at ending this. Can you confirm target location? She gritted her teeth, setting her jaw. I've got a bead on him, but he's not playing nice. He's watching, waiting. I'll need more time. Time is something we can't afford. You've already taken the first step, Harrow. Now finish it. Her hand hovered over the comm unit, ready to cut the signal. But she hesitated. There was something in their voices, something in the way they spoke that made her uneasy. It wasn't just the urgency, it was the weight of expectation. Understood, she replied coldly. I'll make sure Vrax never gets out of this jungle. The line went dead. Reyna let the silence settle. She needed to refocus. The rules of this game were changing. It wasn't just about outgunning him, it was about outthinking him. Vrax knew how to hunt, how to remain unseen. The challenge now wasn't just surviving, it was making him believe she had given up. Making him believe he was the hunter when, in truth, he was already in her sights. She packed up the last of her supplies and moved swiftly, slinking through the trees toward the river that cut through the dense forest. She crossed it quietly, stepping over smooth stones, listening for any sign of movement in the distance. The sun was now high enough to cut through the haze. Reyna's eyes narrowed as she reached the edge of a cliffside. The ground here was uneven, a slanted plateau that led to a thin path veiled by overhanging vines. She knew where she needed to go. She just had to outlast him. It wasn't long before her motion sensor blinked. Something was moving through the trees. The distortion was faint but unmistakable. Vrax. He was stalking her, but this time, he was the one out of place. His movements were cautious, slower, deliberate, as if he was unsure whether to attack or retreat. But Reyna knew the truth. He was trying to find her. She settled into position behind a massive boulder and steadied her breath. The wind was light, but it carried the faint smell of the jungle's damp earth. If he was going to try, he'd make his move soon. Then the air shifted. A soft whistle, barely perceptible, sliced through the stillness. Reyna's eyes shot open. A tripwire. The faintest glimmer of light bounced off metal. Vrax had set a trap. She had no choice. She snapped her rifle to her shoulder, firing a single, precise shot that shattered the wire before it could trigger the explosive. There was no time for hesitation. Crack. A figure flitted between the trees, just beyond her line of sight. He's close. She dropped low to the ground, feeling the cool mud against her skin, her rifle held tight in both hands. She moved like a shadow, creeping along the forest floor, keeping her body flat, and her movements slow. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, the ground beneath her buckled. Her heart raced. She barely avoided the falling rocks as a series of explosions tore through the path behind her. Reyna scrambled to her feet, rolling toward a crevice in the cliffside. Her head spun with the chaos, the earth trembling, the air thick with the scent of smoke. He was no longer playing by the rules. This was his declaration of war. Reyna dropped into the shadows just as a set of heavy footsteps rumbled above her position. The distant sound of metallic boots on rock. She didn't dare look up, didn't dare expose herself. Her fingers tightened around her weapon, sweat beading on her forehead. Then she heard it. A voice. Vrax. You think you can outsmart me? His voice was cold, mocking, distorted by the jungle's chaotic noise. I've been hunting you since the moment I heard your name. Reyna gritted her teeth, eyes flicking over the terrain. The trees were silent now, the leaves still, as though they too were waiting for his next move. She forced herself to be still. Running won't save you. Not from me. Not from my sight. His voice was clearer now, closer, the mocking undertone giving way to menace. I can hear your heartbeat, human. Feel your fear. The hairs on the back of Reyna's neck stood at attention. He's toying with me. She couldn't afford to let him get inside her head. She needed to make him think he had the advantage. You think I fear you? She called out, her voice steady despite the rapid thudding of her chest. I've seen creatures like you fall before. There was a moment of silence, then a low chuckle. I'm no creature. She didn't wait. She didn't need to. She could hear his position now. He was moving left, moving toward her abandoned sniper nest. Her pulse quickened. He was predictable. Reyna's eyes narrowed. She whispered, It's your move, Vrax. And then, just as the wind shifted again, she was on the move too. Reyna's heartbeat was steady, calm, a stark contrast to the war raging in her mind. Vrax was still out there. His presence loomed like a shadow, whispering through the dense foliage. Every rustle of leaves, every shift in the air was a possible threat, and she had to stay sharp. She crouched behind a cluster of vines, barely moving. Her rifle was slung across her back, hidden beneath the foliage, and her pulse was perfectly in sync with the jungle around her. The trees were silent now, the tension thick enough to choke the air. No more mockery, no more games. Vrax was out there, and it was his turn to play. A flicker in her peripheral vision snapped her attention to the left. Movement. The faintest distortion of a figure weaving between the trees. For a split second she thought it was a trick of the light, but then it moved again, more deliberate this time. She exhaled slowly, her breath cutting through the stillness. He was too confident. He was making a mistake. Vrax believed the hunt had already been won. That gave her an edge. Reyna's hands flexed. No more playing by his rules. This time, it was her turn to control the pace. She pushed off the ground, moving in a low crouch, staying close to the tree trunks as she moved toward the riverbank. The water was shallow here, running fast, barely making a ripple over the smooth stones. The sound of it was soothing, at least, for a moment. It distracted her from the heavy weight of Vrax's presence. She moved swiftly, but silently. The jungle had become her domain now. Her feet knew the ground, and her eyes knew the shadows. She followed the river eastward, knowing Vrax would expect her to retreat deeper into the jungle. But she wasn't running. She was preparing. The jungle was dense, the undergrowth thick with vines and roots, but Reyna had mapped this terrain in her mind for years. She had trained for moments like this, silent, focused, with everything at stake. She didn't need to see Vrax to know his movements. He was predictable, a product of his species' arrogance. He thought his training gave him the upper hand, but she had something he didn't: patience. She reached the edge of a clearing, the area wide and open, with a thick canopy overhead. The soft hum of the jungle had been replaced with an eerie silence. This was the moment. The trap was set. Reyna hunkered down behind a massive boulder, eyes narrowing as she scanned the trees, waiting for the next flicker of movement. It didn't take long. A faint rustling, the softest of sounds, a footstep, too soft to register. But she heard it. He was close. She moved slowly, calculating, her fingers grazing the trigger of her rifle, adjusting for wind speed and distance. The moment he broke the tree-line, she'd fire. But the seconds dragged on, each one stretching into an eternity. He was out there, watching. The distance was growing too much. Vrax wasn't giving her the opening she needed. Think, she told herself. He's expecting you to make the first move. Make him move instead. Reyna exhaled slowly, took a step back, and disappeared into the shadows. She retraced her steps, moving up the opposite side of the clearing. She wasn't leaving. She was just changing angles. The air felt charged, thick with anticipation. The longer Vrax waited, the more desperate he would become. And desperate mistakes were the ones that got you killed. A voice, low but clear, crackled through her comms. Echo 1, we have you in our sights. Reinforcements will be in range soon. Can you confirm status? Reyna's pulse tightened at the sound. Reinforcements. That was the last thing she needed. She wasn't here for backup. She was here to finish this. Negative, she said coolly, her voice steady. I'm handling this. Keep your distance. There was a brief pause before the comm link flickered with a final, disapproving message. Understood. Keep us posted. Reyna clicked off the comms. She didn't need them. She needed to focus. Every second she spent worrying about their expectations was a second she'd lose against Vrax. She took another step. Another breath. Then, movement. A branch cracked. Something was coming toward her. She didn't hesitate. She dove forward, hands outstretched, planting herself against the ground, eyes locked on the shadow passing in front of her. She heard his voice before she saw him, low and deliberate. I told you it wouldn't be this easy. She grinned, shifting into position. Her rifle came up, the reticle lining up perfectly with his silhouette. Her finger hovered over the trigger. The split second stretched into infinity as he moved, adjusting his stance. And then, crack, her bullet hit. But not where it was meant to. Not directly. The shot had grazed his arm. Not enough to put him down, but enough to slow him. He staggered back, cursing, his cloak flickering in and out, revealing his form for just a second longer. Reyna fired again. Crack. This time, she didn't miss. The shot hit him square in the chest. He went down, crashing into the underbrush. For a moment, the jungle was silent once more, save for the heavy sound of her breath. She advanced, keeping low, every muscle taut with readiness. She crept closer, each step slow, deliberate. The trees around her seemed to breathe, their leaves rustling as she passed. Then she saw him. Vrax, sprawled out, his cloak fluttering in the wind. His body, though clearly injured, was still twitching with life. He groaned, looking up at her, eyes filled with anger and disbelief. "You think you've won, human?" Reyna didn't answer. She knelt down beside him, aiming her rifle at his head. There was no hesitation this time. "I don't think anything," she said, her voice low and final. "I know." Vrax's eyes flickered with recognition, the last vestiges of his arrogance breaking away. For the first time, Reyna allowed herself a smile. This hunt was over. Vrax's blood pooled beneath him, staining the earth in dark crimson. His eyes, once filled with arrogance and fury, were now wide with disbelief. The jungle around them seemed to hold its breath as Reyna stood over him, her rifle still trained on his head. "You," Vrax's voice was barely a whisper, strained and full of venom. "You really think this will end the way you want?" Reyna's fingers tightened on the rifle, but she didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. The jungle hummed softly, the breeze stirring the leaves above. The world felt too quiet, almost too still for a battle that had been fought so fiercely. She stared at Vrax, watching his slow, labored breathing. His body, though weakened by the impact, was still full of defiance. He hadn't given up, not yet. "Do you still think you can win?" she asked, her voice steady and calm. He grinned weakly, the expression twisted with pain and fury. "You humans, always so confident, always so sure of yourselves, but you don't know what you've unleashed. This war is far from over." Reyna didn't flinch. "It's over for you." He laughed, a low, painful sound that echoed in the silence between them. "We'll see. You may have killed me, but the generals won't stop until Earth is nothing but ashes." Reyna's eyes narrowed. He was trying to rattle her, but she wasn't that easy to break. She had trained for moments like this, moments where the enemy would use every tactic, every mind game, to turn the tide. She had learned not to let the words of her enemies cloud her judgment. But his words lingered in her mind, gnawing at her. She knew Vrax wasn't wrong. This was bigger than just him, bigger than one battle in a jungle. The war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "Perhaps," she said, "but I've already won the most important part. You're done." Vrax's grin faded, replaced by a look of cold contempt. "You think killing me will stop them? You think they'll just surrender because you killed their best soldier?" Reyna shifted her weight, crouching slightly, never taking her eyes off him. She knew he was trying to distract her, make her doubt herself, but his weakness was evident. There was no escaping the inevitable. "I don't need them to surrender," she replied, her voice carrying the weight of certainty. "I need them to fear what happens when you piss off a human." Vrax's eyes flickered, the first hint of something other than arrogance. For a brief moment it seemed like the weight of his words hit him. But then, just as quickly, it was gone. He sneered at her. "You're a fool," he spat. "You think they'll be afraid? The generals are already preparing for their next move. They'll wipe your species from the galaxy, one world at a time." Reyna's expression remained unchanged. "I've already sent a message. One they'll never forget." Vrax's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, doubt flickered in his gaze. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned slightly, glancing down at the device strapped to her wrist. It was a small, seemingly insignificant piece of technology. A communicator, yes, but not just any communicator. It was an encrypted message relay that could broadcast far beyond the reach of standard military communications. It was her insurance, the last piece of her plan. "You won't be the last to hear from me," Reyna said finally, her voice firm. "When I'm done here, when I've finished what needs to be done, your generals will understand that humans are not to be underestimated." Vrax's eyes searched hers for any sign of hesitation. He found none. "You're a fool," he repeated, his voice thick with rage. "You won't survive this." Reyna let out a slow breath. That's what you said about the last human standing on this planet, Vrax. And yet, here I am. She could see the flicker of realization in his eyes, the one moment where his arrogance cracked. But it didn't last long. In an instant, his body went rigid, and his breath caught in his throat as his hand shot toward his side. The faintest of movements. Too late. Reyna squeezed the trigger. Crack. The sound of the shot was sharp and final. Vrax's body jerked violently, and he collapsed against the earth with a thud, the last remnants of his life draining into the soil. Silence descended once more, suffocating in its weight. Reyna stood over him, her rifle lowering slowly. There was no satisfaction in the kill. There was no joy. Just the grim reality of what had to be done. For a long moment she simply stared down at the fallen alien general, her thoughts far from the jungle around her. She had done her part. She had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The weight of it settled on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Earth wasn't safe yet. The fight was far from finished. She had proven herself today, but that didn't mean the next battle would be any easier. The jungle around her was still, save for the whisper of the wind and the distant calls of wildlife. There was no applause, no victory banners, only the haunting knowledge that this was one battle in a much larger war. Reyna tapped her wrist device, sending the message she had prepared. It was short, sharp, and to the point. To the Galactic generals, your best is dead. We are not afraid. You will learn what happens when you fight humans. She stood for a moment, watching the jungle reclaim its space. And then, without another word, she turned and walked away, the sound of her boots barely audible over the rustling of the leaves. The war wasn't over. Not yet. But she would be ready. Earth would be ready.